A desolate discovery. Sergeant Tom Reed's boots crunched down onto the surface of Zorth, the desolate planet stretching in every direction like a barren wasteland. The air was thick with silence, disturbed only by the occasional whistling of the wind that swept up dust and debris. Once a vibrant galactic outpost, Zorth now lay abandoned and forgotten. Tom's mission was routine, a simple salvage operation, or so he'd been told. But the emptiness of the landscape gnawed at him, a quiet warning that something deeper lurked in the shadows of this forsaken world. Tom advanced cautiously, his keen eyes scanning for any signs of life. Zorth had been abandoned for years, yet signs of a mysterious presence littered the landscape. Massive footprints imprinted in the dirt, crushed tree stumps, and rocks fractured as though something enormous had trampled through. His military instincts flared. This wasn't typical erosion or animal behavior. It was something bigger. Then he saw it. Atop a distant mesa, a shadow loomed, barely distinguishable from the rocky surroundings but unmistakable in its form. A massive creature, fur-matted and patchy, sat hunched over. Its posture was slumped, exuding an aura of exhaustion and despair. The creature's size was staggering, towering over the landscape like a silent guardian. Tom's breath caught as he recognized it from galactic lore, the legendary King Kong gorilla of Zorth. Long ago, this alien beast had been the pride of the Galactic Coalition, a living weapon deployed during the war that ravaged Zorth. But as the years passed and the Coalition moved on, the creature had been left behind, abandoned like a relic of an ancient battle. Tom felt a pang of sorrow as he studied the mighty beast. Once revered and feared, the gorilla now looked broken, its spirit shattered by isolation and neglect. Tom crouched, watching from a distance as the creature let out a deep, mournful groan that echoed across the valley. The sound sent a chill down his spine, a haunting reminder of its loneliness and suffering. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a creature with a soul, a being that had been cast aside and forgotten. Tom's radio crackled to life. "Sergeant Reed, have you secured the salvage site?" A voice from command barked in his ear. Tom hesitated, glancing back at his rusted ship resting on the dusty terrain. Technically, his mission was to retrieve any remaining Coalition resources, to ensure nothing valuable went to waste. But as he looked back at the creature, he felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. "Negative," he replied, his voice calm but resolute. "I found something different. I'm going to investigate." Before his superiors could object, Tom clicked off the radio, letting silence settle over him once more. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. He had no idea how the creature would react, but he wasn't about to turn his back on it. Moving with calculated care, he approached the creature, his movements slow and deliberate. Each step brought him closer to the gorilla, and each step deepened his awe. Up close, he could see the toll time had taken on the once mighty beast. Its thick fur was matted with dirt, patches missing altogether, revealing rough, scarred skin beneath. This was the same creature that had once crushed armored vehicles with a single blow, yet now it looked frail, vulnerable, and heartbreakingly tired. As he neared, the gorilla's eyes shifted toward him, gleaming faintly in the fading sunlight. Tom felt his heart pound, unsure if the creature would perceive him as a threat. But instead of aggression, he saw only wariness in its gaze. It was as though the creature had resigned itself to its fate, too exhausted to care about his approach. Tom cleared his throat, his voice soft but steady. "I'm not here to hurt you," he murmured, hoping the creature would somehow understand. "I'm here to help." In response, the gorilla let out a low, rumbling growl, its massive fists curling into the dirt. But there was no malice in its posture, only exhaustion. Tom felt a surge of determination. He couldn't just leave it here to die, abandoned by those who had once praised it as a hero. Reaching into his pack, he pulled out a small ration bar, unwrapping it slowly. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. He extended it toward the gorilla, who sniffed at it curiously before gently plucking it from his hand with surprising delicacy. It devoured the bar in a single bite, looking back at Tom with what could almost be gratitude. "Guess you were hungry, huh?" Tom said, a faint smile creeping onto his face. He inched a bit closer, encouraged by the creature's lack of hostility. As he sat down a few feet away, the gorilla lowered its head, as if accepting his presence. They sat in silence as the sun dipped below the mountains, casting the barren landscape in hues of orange and purple. Tom couldn't help but marvel at the peacefulness of the scene. This was the galaxy's most feared beast, yet here it was, quietly sharing a moment with him. As the minutes passed, Tom felt an inexplicable bond forming, a sense of kinship that went beyond words. He didn't know what he could do for the creature, but one thing was certain: he wasn't leaving without trying to help. Tom's mind whirled with possibilities, strategies for how he might get the gorilla off this planet. He couldn't call for backup. No one would authorize a rescue mission for a dangerous beast. This was a mission he'd have to undertake alone, and he would need a transport ship to do it. For the first time since landing on Zorth, Tom felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had come here for salvage, for scraps of old battles, but instead, he had found a creature in need of rescue. He wasn't sure how he would pull it off, but one thing was clear: he wasn't about to abandon the creature as the Coalition had. As the stars began to dot the sky, Tom looked up at the gorilla, who returned his gaze with those deep, soulful eyes. "I'll be back tomorrow," he promised, rising to his feet. The gorilla gave a soft rumble, a sound that felt like an acknowledgement. That night, Tom lay awake in his ship, sketching out plans on his datapad, his mind racing with ideas. The gorilla, whom he'd come to think of as Titan, was no longer just a creature. It was a soul left behind by the galaxy, a relic of a forgotten war, and it deserved a second chance. Whatever it took, he was going to get Titan out of here. And with that promise, a new journey began. Bonds forged in silence. The next morning, Tom woke to the gentle hum of his ship's systems, the cold metal walls surrounding him feeling strangely foreign compared to the raw, open landscape of Zorth. His mind was set on a singular purpose now: freeing Titan, the giant alien gorilla who had once been the Coalition's greatest weapon and was now little more than a forgotten relic of war. The previous night's encounter had stirred something in him, and he knew he couldn't abandon the creature to its fate. After a quick scan of his equipment, he packed a few ration bars and slung his bag over his shoulder. The Coalition may not have approved, but he'd make this mission his own. As he stepped out onto the dusty terrain, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, even if his plan was still forming in fragments. When he reached Titan's usual resting place, the creature was sitting in the same slumped posture atop the mesa, its massive form silhouetted against the rising sun. But as Tom approached, he noticed the gorilla shift slightly, its golden eyes tracking his movement with a faint glimmer of recognition. A low, almost welcoming rumble emanated from its chest as he drew closer. Tom sat down a few feet from Titan, pulling a ration bar from his bag and holding it out. Titan leaned forward, accepting it with the same delicate movement as the day before. As it chewed, Tom couldn't help but notice the scars that crisscrossed Titan's face and body. Some were old, faded reminders of battles long past, while others were newer, raw, and jagged. Each scar told a story, a history of violence and survival that had left this once mighty beast drained and weary. "Look at you," Tom murmured, almost to himself. "They made you into a weapon, didn't they? Used you, then left you here when you were no longer needed." His words hung in the air, and though he knew Titan couldn't understand them, he felt compelled to voice the injustice of it all. In the silence that followed, Tom could feel the weight of Titan's gaze, as if the creature understood his sentiments. Maybe it wasn't the words themselves, but the tone, the empathy that radiated from Tom's voice. For the first time, Tom felt that he wasn't just a stranger in Titan's eyes, he was an ally. The morning wore on, and Tom found himself sharing his own stories, tales of his time in the military, of friends lost and missions barely survived. He spoke about the comrades he had seen used up and cast aside, the ones who had given everything only to be left with nothing when the battles were over. He didn't know why he was talking, perhaps because he had spent so long without anyone to truly confide in. Or maybe, in some inexplicable way, he felt that Titan was the only one who would understand. As he spoke, Titan listened, the soft rise and fall of its massive chest, a steady rhythm in the stillness of the day. The creature's body, once a fearsome engine of destruction, now appeared almost gentle in repose. And as Tom looked into those intelligent, sorrowful eyes, he realized that Titan was more than just a war beast. It was a kindred spirit, a creature that had been hurt, used, and abandoned, much like many of the soldiers Tom had known. Eventually, Tom fell silent, lost in his own thoughts. Titan's gaze never wavered, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. It was as if they had both accepted each other's presence, not as enemies or even strangers, but as beings sharing a common history of sacrifice and loss. Tom reached into his pack and pulled out his datapad, sketching out the beginnings of a plan. If he was going to get Titan off Zorth, he would need resources, a ship capable of carrying the gorilla, fuel, and a way to bypass the Coalition's security protocols. He had no illusions about the challenges ahead. The Coalition wouldn't just let him walk away with one of their former weapons. This mission was his alone, and it would take everything he had to pull it off. In the following days, Tom established a routine. Each morning, he would visit Titan, bringing what little food he could spare and sitting beside the creature, speaking in soft tones about his plans and the steps they would need to take. As the days passed, Titan grew more comfortable with his presence, allowing him to sit closer, even resting its massive head on the ground near him. The gorilla's breathing was slow and steady, its body relaxed in a way that suggested it had finally found a measure of peace. As they shared these silent moments, Tom's admiration for Titan deepened. He saw strength in the creature, not just the physical power that had once terrorized enemies, but a resilience born of survival. It was a quiet, unbreakable will that had allowed Titan to endure years of isolation and abandonment. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Tom decided it was time to take the next step. He would need to access a Coalition outpost for a ship capable of carrying Titan, a risk that would put him squarely in violation of his orders. But he was past caring about orders. This mission had become personal. "All right, Titan," he murmured, looking up at the gorilla's massive form. "I'm going to be gone for a few days. I have to get us away off this rock, and it won't be easy, but I'll be back, I promise." Titan's golden eyes regarded him solemnly, and though the creature couldn't speak, Tom felt as though it understood his intention. He reached out a hand, placing it gently on the gorilla's rough, scarred fur. It was a small gesture, a promise of his commitment to their shared mission. The next day, Tom set out, trekking across the barren landscape toward a long-abandoned Coalition supply depot he had remembered from the early days of his deployment. The journey was arduous, the harsh winds and searing heat of Zorth wearing him down. But he pushed forward, driven by the thought of Titan waiting for him. The depot was little more than a crumbling skeleton of metal and wires, but after hours of searching, he found what he needed: an old transport ship, dusty but serviceable, hidden beneath a rusted canopy. After a day of intense repair work, Tom managed to get the ship operational. The Coalition would track him the moment he lifted off, so he had to work quickly. He loaded it with whatever supplies he could salvage and set the coordinates for his landing site near Titan. His heart raced with a mix of anticipation and fear as he fired up the engines. This was the moment of truth. As the ship descended toward Titan's mesa, Tom caught sight of the gorilla's massive silhouette waiting, framed against the twilight sky. He landed the ship and opened the cargo hold, stepping out onto the rocky terrain with a grin he couldn't suppress. "Ready to go," he called out, knowing that Titan couldn't answer, but hoping that the creature sensed the significance of the moment. To his relief, Titan slowly rose to its feet, its eyes fixed on Tom with a look that could almost be called trust. The gorilla lumbered forward, its massive form casting a shadow over the ship. Tom guided Titan inside, ensuring it was safely positioned within the cargo bay. As he settled into the cockpit and prepared for takeoff, Tom glanced back, catching Titan's gaze through the open doorway. The creature's eyes were calm, filled with a quiet resolve. It was as if, after years of solitude, Titan had finally found a purpose, a reason to hope. With a deep breath, Tom engaged the thrusters, lifting the ship off the ground. The barren landscape of Zorth fell away beneath them, and for the first time, Tom felt a sense of liberation he hadn't known in years. Together, he and Titan were leaving behind a past filled with pain and betrayal, venturing into the unknown with nothing but a fragile bond and a shared determination. As the stars stretched out before them, Tom knew they were on a path that would change both of their lives forever. They had embarked on a journey not just to escape, but to reclaim their identities, their dignity, and their freedom. And in that moment, neither man nor beast felt alone. A fragile alliance. The hum of the ship's engines filled the silence as Tom guided their stolen vessel through the emptiness of space, leaving Zorth far behind. Titan, the massive alien gorilla, lay in the cargo hold, its golden eyes watching Tom with a calm resignation. It was almost as if Titan understood that their fate was now intertwined, that this fragile alliance was all they had to navigate the dangers ahead. Tom's thoughts raced as he considered their next steps. They were fugitives now, fugitives with a mission that defied every directive he'd ever been given. Their immediate destination was a remote star system, a place where the Coalition's watchful gaze rarely ventured. But their journey would be fraught with challenges. Supplies were limited, and the ship was barely space-worthy. He knew he'd have to make a stop at a trading station to gather more resources, even if it meant risking detection. As they traveled, Tom spent his hours maintaining the ship and checking on Titan, who seemed oddly content in its new surroundings. The gorilla had adapted quickly to the close confines of the cargo hold, resting quietly in a corner and only moving when Tom brought it food or water. Despite its massive size, Titan possessed a surprising patience, as if understanding the delicate nature of their escape. On the third day, they approached a small, unmonitored trading post orbiting a gas giant. It was a rundown station, a haven for smugglers, merchants, and outcasts who valued discretion over loyalty to the Coalition. Tom knew the risks of being seen here, but he had no choice. He needed supplies, and Titan's condition required medical attention that went beyond his limited field kit. As they docked, Tom made his way down to the cargo hold, giving Titan a reassuring nod. "Stay here," he said, holding up a hand as if the creature could understand. Titan watched him closely, its gaze steady and trusting. It was a look that grounded Tom, reminding him of the responsibility he had taken on. The Coalition may have abandoned Titan, but he had vowed to be different. The station was a hive of activity, with traders hawking rare minerals, alien artifacts, and contraband weapons. Tom moved through the crowd, keeping his face hidden and his steps quick. His first stop was a small medical supply vendor, where he purchased antibiotics and wound dressings for Titan. He filled his pack with rations, energy cells, and spare parts, anything that could sustain them on their journey. As he was finishing his transactions, a familiar voice drifted over the noise of the market. Well, if it isn't Tom Reed." Tom's heart stopped as he turned to see Captain Selene Cause, a former comrade from his military days. She was dressed in civilian clothes, but her stance and steely gaze were unmistakable. Tom had known her as a sharp strategist and an unflinching leader, but he hadn't expected to cross paths with her out here. "Captain," he greeted her, forcing a casual tone. "Fancy seeing you in a place like this." She raised an eyebrow, her gaze assessing. "What are you doing here, Reed? Last I heard, you were assigned to salvage duty on Zorth." Tom shifted uncomfortably. He knew Selene was sharp. She'd see through any lie he attempted. "It's complicated," he admitted, lowering his voice. "I came across something unexpected on Zorth, something the Coalition left behind." Selene's eyes narrowed, a spark of interest igniting. "You don't mean?" Tom nodded. "Yes. The gorilla, the King Kong alien. They left it to die on that rock. I couldn't just leave it there." She studied him for a long moment, her face unreadable. So, you're risking your career, your freedom, to save an alien beast the Coalition abandoned. Titan isn't just a beast, Tom replied firmly. It's intelligent. It's not the mindless weapon they made it out to be. Selene's expression softened, a hint of empathy showing in her eyes. You always had a bleeding heart, Reed, but you realize they won't let you just walk away with it, don't you? The Coalition will hunt you down for this. They don't take kindly to deserters, especially ones who steal their property. Tom met her gaze, a steely resolve in his own. I know the risks, Selene, but I'm not asking for your approval. I just need supplies, and then I'll be gone. She crossed her arms, studying him with a calculating gaze. Finally, she let out a sigh. You're lucky I'm the only one who recognized you. Take what you need and get out of here. I won't report you, this time. But be careful, Tom. The Coalition doesn't forgive, and they don't forget. He nodded gratefully, watching as she turned and disappeared into the crowd. Her warning lingered in his mind as he made his way back to the ship, his pulse quickening with the realization of how close he had come to capture. The Coalition wouldn't just let him slip away with Titan. They would pursue him, and they would do it with all the force at their disposal. When he returned to the ship, Titan was waiting in the cargo hold, its eyes lighting up at the sight of him. Tom unpacked the supplies, setting out a fresh meal for the gorilla and applying the medical supplies to its wounds. Titan accepted his care with quiet dignity, its massive form docile as Tom worked. As he patched up Titan's wounds, Tom spoke in a low, soothing tone. We're on a run now, you and I. The Coalition won't stop until they find us, but I'm not giving up on you. We're going to find somewhere safe, somewhere you can finally be free. Titan rumbled in response, a sound that reverberated through the cargo hold like distant thunder. It was a sound that resonated with Tom, a reminder that they shared a bond deeper than words. Together, they had defied the Coalition's expectations, and now they were fighting for a future that neither of them had ever thought possible. The days stretched into weeks as they traveled from one remote star system to another, dodging Coalition patrols and seeking refuge in uncharted territories. Each encounter with hostile forces only strengthened their bond, as Tom and Titan learned to trust each other in ways that went beyond mere survival. Tom found himself talking to the gorilla as if it were a friend, sharing stories from his past, confiding fears he had never voiced aloud. One evening, as they drifted through the quiet expanse of space, Tom sat beside Titan in the cargo hold, his hand resting on the creature's rough fur. I don't know where we're going, Titan, he admitted, his voice barely more than a whisper. But as long as you're with me, I know we'll find our way. Titan gazed at him with those deep golden eyes, and in that moment, Tom felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. They were fugitives, outcasts, and yet in each other, they had found a purpose that transcended the dangers they faced. Their journey took them to the fringes of Coalition-controlled space, to planets untouched by war and places where the Coalition's influence was little more than a whisper. And though they were constantly on the move, Tom knew that they were closer to freedom with each passing day. For the first time in his life, he felt that he was fighting for something real, something worth every sacrifice he'd made. But as they approached a secluded planet rumored to be a haven for ex-Coalition members and deserters, Tom's console lit up with a proximity alert. His heart sank as he saw the unmistakable signature of a Coalition warship closing in on them. They had been tracked. He raced to the cockpit, his hands flying over the controls as he attempted to evade the incoming ship. But it was no use. The warship was faster, its weapons already locked onto their vessel. Tom knew they couldn't withstand an attack. Their only hope was to negotiate or escape to the planet's surface. As the Coalition ship hailed them, Tom steeled himself, glancing back at Titan. "Hold on, buddy," he murmured. "This isn't over yet." The Coalition's voice crackled over the comms, cold and unyielding. "This is Commander Lane of the Coalition forces. Surrender now, or we will open fire." Tom took a deep breath, his mind racing. Surrender wasn't an option, not after everything they fought for. He tightened his grip on the controls, his resolve hardening as he prepared for one last desperate maneuver. With a surge of adrenaline, he directed their ship into a dive, aiming for the cover of the planet's dense atmosphere. The Coalition warship followed, weapons firing, but Tom's focus was unbreakable. He pushed the ship to its limits, evading laser fire and weaving through the clouds as they descended. As they broke through the atmosphere, the ground rushed up to meet them, and Tom struggled to keep the ship under control. But as they neared the surface, he saw a forested valley ahead, a place where they might hide long enough to escape detection. With a final burst of speed, he brought the ship down, landing amid the trees. The Coalition warships circled above, searching for them, but Tom knew they had gained precious moments of freedom. He turned to Titan, his face grim but determined. "We made it," he whispered, his voice filled with relief. "We're safe, for now." And as the echoes of their escape faded into the silence of the forest, Tom knew that their journey was far from over. But with Titan by his side, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. The price of freedom. The dense canopy of the forest shielded Tom and Titan from the prying eyes of the Coalition warships circling above, casting shadows over the ship's hull where they had landed. Tom exhaled in relief, resting his hand on the controls as he listened to the hum of the engine winding down. They had barely escaped with their lives, but he knew they were far from safe. The Coalition would never give up on finding them. To them, he and Titan were fugitives, a man and a beast defying the very order they sought to uphold. Tom powered down the ship's systems, hoping the thick trees and the surrounding rocky terrain would mask their presence from Coalition sensors. He glanced back at Titan, who sat silently in the cargo hold, watching him with an intense gaze. It was strange, this bond he felt with the creature. They communicated without words, yet there was a deep understanding between them, one that transcended language and species. "I don't know how long we can stay here," Tom murmured, almost to himself. "But we need to lay low for a while, figure out our next move." Titan let out a low rumble, its golden eyes still fixed on Tom. He wasn't sure if the gorilla fully grasped the situation, but there was a strange calmness in its demeanor, a quiet acceptance that reassured him. Tom grabbed his gear and opened the ship's hatch, stepping out into the forest. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, a stark contrast to the barren wasteland of Zorth. Birds chirped in the distance, and shafts of sunlight pierced through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor. It was a world alive with sounds and smells, a place untouched by war and technology. For a moment, Tom felt a pang of nostalgia, a yearning for the simplicity he had lost when he enlisted with the Coalition. He gestured for Titan to follow, and the massive gorilla lumbered out of the ship, moving with surprising grace for a creature of its size. As it stepped into the forest, Titan sniffed the air, its eyes widening as it took in the sights and sounds of this strange new environment. There was a moment of wonder in its expression, a flicker of curiosity that made Tom smile. For all the Coalition had done to turn Titan into a weapon, it was clear that the creature still retained its own sense of awe. They spent the next few hours exploring their surroundings, venturing deeper into the forest as Tom scouted for a suitable hiding spot. Eventually, they came across a small, secluded cave nestled between two rocky cliffs. It was well hidden, the entrance concealed by thick vines and moss. Tom inspected the area, checking for any signs of wildlife or danger, but the cave appeared abandoned. "This will do," he said, turning to Titan. "It's not much, but it's safe." The gorilla rumbled in response, its massive form settling down near the cave entrance, as if it understood Tom's intention. They had only just begun their journey together, yet already Titan seemed to trust him implicitly, as if sensing the purity of his intentions. As night fell, they made camp near the cave, the only sounds those of the forest and the occasional rustling of leaves. Tom prepared a simple meal, sharing his rations with Titan, who accepted them gratefully. They ate in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. For Tom, the quiet of the forest was a welcome respite, a chance to reflect on everything he had left behind. He had once been a soldier, a man of duty and order, but now he was a fugitive, an outcast fighting for the freedom of a creature the galaxy had deemed unworthy. As he gazed into the crackling flames of their makeshift campfire, he couldn't help but wonder if he was doing the right thing. The Coalition had branded Titan as a threat, a monster too dangerous to be set free. But in the short time he had known the creature, Tom had seen a different side to it, a side that was gentle, intelligent, and undeniably sentient. Titan wasn't a weapon, it was a being with thoughts and emotions, a creature that had suffered and survived. The firelight cast shadows over Titan's face, illuminating the scars that crisscrossed its skin. Tom's heart ached as he thought of the battles this creature had fought, the pain it had endured. He knew what it was like to be used, to be cast aside when no longer deemed useful. In Titan, he saw a reflection of his own struggles, a kindred spirit bound by the same chains of duty and sacrifice. As they sat in silence, a distant sound reached Tom's ears, the faint hum of a Coalition patrol ship, scanning the area for signs of their presence. He froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon as he listened intently. The ship was still a ways off, but he knew it was only a matter of time before the Coalition closed in on them. They couldn't stay here forever. They would have to keep moving, always one step ahead of their pursuers. But as he glanced at Titan, he knew he couldn't give up. They had come too far to turn back now. This journey was about more than survival. It was about freedom, a chance to break free from the chains that had bound them both. He was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. Over the next few days, Tom and Titan settled into a routine, exploring the forest by day and hiding in the cave by night. They encountered other creatures in the forest, small, curious animals that watched them from a distance, unafraid of Titan's massive form. The gorilla, for its part, seemed at ease in this new environment, moving with a quiet grace that belied its size. It was as if the forest had awakened something within Titan, a primal connection to the world around it. One evening, as they returned to the cave after a day of foraging, Tom noticed a change in Titan's behavior. The gorilla was tense, its gaze fixed on the shadows of the forest, its muscles taut with anticipation. Tom followed its gaze, his hand moving to his weapon as he scanned the area for any signs of danger. Then he saw them, a group of Coalition soldiers, their armor gleaming in the fading light as they moved silently through the trees. They had found them. Tom's heart pounded as he weighed his options. They were outnumbered, and Titan's wounds hadn't fully healed. Fighting wasn't an option. They would have to run. He motioned for Titan to follow, his voice a barely audible whisper. "Come on, big guy, we've got to move." Titan's eyes met his, and for a moment, Tom saw a flicker of understanding in the creature's gaze. Without hesitation, the gorilla rose to its feet, following Tom as they slipped into the shadows of the forest. They moved quickly, weaving through the trees as the Coalition soldiers closed in, their footsteps echoing through the silence. The forest became a labyrinth of shadows and obstacles as they fled, the soldiers hot on their trail. Tom's mind raced, calculating their route and scanning for any possible escape. The Coalition wouldn't stop until they were caught, and he knew they were running out of options. Just as they reached the edge of the forest, a sharp crack split the air, a gunshot, echoing through the trees. Tom felt a searing pain in his side as he stumbled, his vision blurring. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to keep moving as Titan slowed, turning to look at him with a worried expression. "I'm fine," he whispered, though the pain was intense. "Keep going, don't stop." But Titan didn't move. Instead, it turned to face the approaching soldiers, its massive form blocking Tom from view. The gorilla's eyes glowed with a fierce determination, a silent vow to protect the man who had saved it. Tom watched in awe as Titan let out a powerful roar, a sound that shook the very ground beneath them. The soldiers faltered, their weapons trained on the gorilla as they hesitated, fear flashing in their eyes. Titan advanced, its massive fists pounding the ground as it let out another roar, a warning to the intruders. The soldiers wavered, uncertain, and in that moment of hesitation, Tom saw his chance. Summoning the last of his strength, he rose to his feet, his hand gripping Titan's fur as he pulled himself forward. "Come on," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Let's go." Titan turned, its gaze softening as it looked at him, and together they slipped into the shadows, leaving the soldiers behind. They moved in silence, the forest swallowing them as they fled, the sounds of the coalition fading into the distance. When they finally stopped, Tom collapsed against a tree, his breath ragged as he clutched his wounded side. Titan knelt beside him, its golden eyes filled with concern as it watched him. Tom managed a weak smile, his hand reaching up to pat the creature's massive arm. "Looks like we make a pretty good team," he whispered, his voice laced with exhaustion. Titan rumbled in response, a sound that felt almost like agreement. As the stars began to appear overhead, Tom knew that their journey was far from over. They had narrowly escaped, but the coalition would continue hunting them, relentless in their pursuit. But as he looked into Titan's eyes, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were fugitives, outcasts fighting for a freedom they had only just begun to taste. And as long as they had each other, he knew they would find a way to survive. With a final, exhausted breath, Tom settled into the forest floor, his hand resting on Titan's rough fur as sleep claimed him. They were two souls bound by fate, two survivors defying the odds in a galaxy that had abandoned them. And in that quiet moment, as the forest held them in its embrace, Tom knew that they had found something worth fighting for. The call to resistance. Dawn's first light filtered through the dense canopy, casting soft golden rays over the makeshift camp Tom and Titan had carved out for themselves. Tom stirred, feeling the sharp ache in his side from the previous night's wound. The coalition's pursuit had nearly cost them their freedom and their lives. He looked over at Titan, who was resting quietly a few feet away, its eyes flickering open as it sensed Tom's movement. The gorilla's gaze held an almost protective warmth, as if it understood the toll their journey had taken on him. Slowly, Tom sat up, wincing as the pain flared. His side was bruised and tender, the makeshift bandage from last night barely holding together. He needed proper medical attention, but that was impossible in their current situation. Titan watched him intently, its eyes filled with concern, and for the first time, Tom found himself feeling truly grateful for the creature's silent companionship. In Titan, he had found an ally, a partner who understood the struggle for survival on a level most beings couldn't. Tom's mind drifted to the coalition soldiers who had nearly caught them the night before. Their uniforms, sleek and efficient, reminded him of his own days in the military. But those days felt like a distant memory now. He had left behind the coalition's orders, the rigid structure and the hollow promises. He had abandoned it all for this, for the chance to save a creature that had been wronged, to carve out a path of his own choosing. "I can't keep doing this, Titan," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "We can't keep running forever." Titan rumbled softly in response, its massive head tilting as it regarded him with a knowing gaze. Tom felt a sense of determination rise within him. The coalition had branded him a traitor, a fugitive, simply because he had dared to defy their orders. But he knew he couldn't let them take away the only thing he still had control over, his sense of purpose, his bond with Titan. They had spent weeks moving from one hiding spot to the next, evading capture and living off whatever meager supplies they could scavenge. But Tom knew they couldn't go on like this. They needed allies, resources, and most importantly, a plan. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the right to exist freely, without the coalition's shadow looming over them. As he pondered their options, a memory stirred within him, a story he had heard during his days as a soldier. There was a hidden network, a group of ex-coalition operatives who had broken away from the military to form their own resistance. They called themselves the Remnants, a name that represented the fragments of lives the coalition had shattered, the pieces of people left behind when they were no longer deemed useful. The Remnants were rumored to operate in the far reaches of the galaxy, far from the coalition's jurisdiction. They were elusive, nearly impossible to track, but Tom knew they were real. He had heard whispers of their deeds, liberating prisoners, sabotaging coalition outposts, helping those who had been abandoned by the very system that claimed to protect them. The idea of finding the remnants filled Tom with a renewed sense of hope. If anyone would understand his plight, it would be them. Perhaps they could provide the refuge he and Titan so desperately needed. He glanced over at Titan, who was watching him with quiet anticipation, as if sensing the shift in Tom's resolve. "All right, big guy," he said, managing a faint smile. "I think it's time we stopped running and started fighting back." Titan responded with a low, rumbling growl, a sound that reverberated through the forest and filled Tom with a sense of unity. Together, they would find the remnants. Together, they would fight for a future where they could live freely, unchained from the coalition's control. The days that followed were filled with rigorous training and planning. The remnants taught him new tactics, strategies designed to outwit and outmaneuver the coalition's forces. Tom's bond with Titan grew even stronger as they trained together, their movements becoming fluid and synchronized, a silent testament to their trust and unity. The remnants accepted Titan as one of their own, recognizing the creature's strength and loyalty as assets to their cause. Together, they formed a small but formidable force, one that operated in the shadows, striking at the coalition's weakest points and liberating those who had been abandoned and oppressed. Tom and Titan became legends among the remnants, a symbol of defiance and resilience, a reminder that even the mightiest forces could be challenged. And as they stood side by side on the battlefield, facing down the coalition's forces with unwavering courage, Tom knew they had found something worth more than freedom. They had found a purpose, a reason to keep fighting.